What up, boys and girls? Today, ya boy will be teaching you some geography. And if there's one thing I love about video games, it's exploring the early betas and alphas, the stuff we didn't get to see but that we can find in the broken or unfinished phase. There has been a lot of information released about World of Warcraft in its early stages, and you can even play some of the alpha, as well as there being a bunch of screenshots that you can find online if you look hard enough. All of these are a thing we will do in another video. The thing we're covering today is early World of Warcraft concept maps. So your boy got you 5 different maps in 5 different stages of development that we will be taking a closer look at. Warcraft 3 was made with World of Warcraft in mind, so the maps for 2 games were made simultaneously. And the map for World of Warcraft was in the making long before 2004 when the game actually released. That's why these early WoW maps are entirely different from the ones we can see in Warcraft 3, because they were intended for both games and made for the same time. We have a few early maps created for World of Warcraft around 1999. This one is probably the earliest one, as it was simply drawn and written with a pencil on paper by Chris Metzen. The Eastern Kingdoms have a bit of a different look to the one we have in Warcraft 2, but its overall geography is pretty similar. Northrend has the same overall general shape that it does in the future, but it's largely unmarked as they probably only had a general idea of it at the time. The biggest change came to the continent of Kalimdor. It was much smaller and most of it was sunken. Note that at this time the Sundering wasn't even a thing in lore, so we don't really know what the story was at the time for the Night Elves. The Sundering would have brought by the destruction of Well of Eternity, but in this map the well is all fine and dandy at Hyjal. We can also see that at this time the Night Elves were supposed to be called the Dark Elves, and to the south of Kalimdor we can see some Tauren lands, meaning they were planned all the way back in 1999. The dotted line is most likely to show what the continent looked like before it sunk, and so, according to this, Undermine is kind of part of Kalimdor, Undermine being the goblin capital that Blizzard wanted to introduce all the way back in vanilla. If you look to the eastern side of the Kalimdor, we can see that the tomb of Sargeras was meant to be at the very edge of the continent. There was also no maelstrom anywhere to be seen, as the well was all fine at this point in the story. There is also a more polished version of this map, though a lot of locations remain unmarked. The next map was drawn on a whiteboard, so I figured it would make sense that it was the next one made, as it's not only on a piece of paper. It goes a little more in depth than the previous one. There's a maelstrom now, though it seems to be a crack in the ground, with Najatar being right next to it. We will start all the way from the top, Northrend again. Nothing much different here. There's a big lake on the western side, and we also got our very first named location in Northrend, Valgard. There was some development of Valgard, as we can see in the alpha screenshots. One of the earliest screenshots of the game ever made, you can see a human male, probably a warrior, standing in what is called Valgard. As you can see, the game was very different at the time. To the west we got our Kalimdor, changed a bit from the previous pen and paper drawing. The well is no longer there, and as we got Maelstrom and Najatar now, we can safely say that at this point of development, the story for Night Elves was heading in the direction we have it today. At the top of Kalimdor we got the island of Kalidar. This was supposed to be a MOBA styled battleground that got cut from the game. We do have some screenshots of it and how it was supposed to look on the minimap. Underneath Kalidar it seems to say Ancient Elves, so their name got changed at this point, though they were still not Night Elves. A bit to the south we can see 3 locations, Mulgore, Durotar and Ratchet. There are no more dotted lines showing us what was sunken, as they probably decided at this point that most of the world is actually sunken. The Tomb of Sargeras is nowhere near Kalimdor, as it was moved nearer Eastern Kingdoms, sort of like it was in Warcraft 2. Speaking of elves and east, let's head a bit to the eastern side, to the very center of the map. Najatar and Maelstrom. Above Najatar, it's very blurry, but it says Naga. There's something to the north of it, but I can't for the life of me figure out what it is. It's this square with some unintelligible letters above it. I'm sure the second word is platform, the first could be aerial or something along those lines. I really can't tell, so if you can, let me know in the comments below. And to the south of Najatar we got the Undermine, further away from Kalimdor and where the continent of Pandaria is today. There are two locations here, but they are also pretty blurry, and I couldn't figure out what these were. The one in the middle I think ends with Will, sort of like the town, like Small Will or Spring Will, and honestly it seems like it says Veldeville. It could be a play on words of the word vaudeville or something like that. Weld would definitely fit with the engineering theme of goblins. And to the far east of the map, Eastern Kingdoms, consisting of Lordaeron, Khaz-Modan, and Azeroth as a kingdom, as well as the island nation of Gul-Tiras. Important thing to note that Azeroth at this time was what we call today the Kingdom of Stormwind, not the whole planet. To the north we got Quel'Thalas, and to the southwest of Quel'Thalas we got Lordaeron, whose capital is not called the Undercity, but Necropolis. Interesting that the original plan was for the undead to have a necropolis, but I have reasons to believe that this necropolis is actually Naxxramas, and that the undead this map refers to are supposed to be hostile to both Alliance and the Horde. You will see why in the next map I will be showing you. The rest of the stuff in Eastern Kingdoms is pretty much the same, with the addition of Booty Bay to the south. These are but first clues to what would later become Stranglethorn Vale. If we now take a look at the whole map, we can see that there was planned transportation for World of Warcraft as well, by Goblin Zeppelins and by Goblin boats mostly, with these red lines. As you can see, the only transportation between continents was through Undermine. This would make sense as Goblins at this point would be neutral. There is also a dotted line that connects Najatar to Undermine, and it has something written on it, but as with the platform above, I couldn't make out what it says. The next map, also from 1999, was painted by Chris Metzen himself on the wall of the Team 2 headquarters, Team 2 being the team that works on World of Warcraft. As you can see, this map was much more in-depth than the previous one, and a lot of places had the general location where they should be. There is also the addition of a new continent, Ulduar. The map is very large, and all of this was supposed to ship with vanilla World of Warcraft, but much of it was ultimately cut from the game. The game was supposed to have 6 whole continents, but ultimately we only ended up with 2, Kalimdor and Eastern Kingdoms. The whole map is covered with green, dark blue and red flags. The flags each have a letter or 2 which mean the race. For example, O is for orcs, T is for Tauren, etc. And above the letter we can see if the settlement in question is a town or a city. So if O and T are green, that would mean the green color represents the Horde. This would then make the goblins belong to the Horde as well, as the Undermine has a green flag on it. Interesting to see that at the north of Kalimdor we got a green NE flag as well. This would make the Night Elves belong to the Horde. This would give the Horde 4 races so far. Now let's take a look at the dark blue flags. There are only 3 of them, unlike the 4 green flags. H for humans, D for dwarves, and HE for high elves in Quel'Thalas. This would mean that there are only 3 alliance races at this point. This leaves us with red flags, and there are 3 of them as well. DE is for demons, most likely, considering there is a DE flag at the north of Kalimdor, probably some sort of version of early Felwood, and there is also a DE flag in the Tomb of Sargeras. NA for the Naga in Najatar and a few other places, and U for the undead. We will analyze all of these further now when we go continent by continent. As this map was made in 1999, it was way before Warcraft 3 got released, so there were no Forsaken in the store yet, and the undead could have just represented the Scourge or evil undead in general. Let's go from the top to the bottom again, from Northrend. Northrend still has the general shape that it always does, though it appears much thinner than it does later or before. On the west we can see something called the Blasted Lands. What this was supposed to be, we can only speculate. Maybe that's where Aegwynn fought the Avatar of Sargeras or something along those lines. A bit to the east of Blasted Lands we can see Icecrown right there, belonging to the Red Undead, most likely Scourge. And to the east of Icecrown there are storm peaks with a notable absence of Ulduar, as Ulduar is a continent on this map. We can also see Gundruk, and below Gundruk I'm sure it says Dragonblight. To the east of Gundruk we can see some place named Kaz something. I think it says Kaz Thoradin, maybe as a reference to the Titan Keeper we would see later in Wrath of the Lich King, but it could also be what would later become Tor Modan, that we can find in Grizzly Hills in the game today. It appears that it was supposed to be a Dwarven Alliance settlement. On the southern coast of Northrend we can see 3 locations. The first one to the west, is blurry, but we can see that it's supposed to be a Naga town. To the east we got Azul Narub, seemingly not part of the Scourge as there is no red U above it. This could mean that the Narubians could have been intended as a neutral race. And to the far east we got Valgard again, the human alliance settlement we talked about on the previous map. On the eastern side of the map we got Kalimdor. Kalidar is still there, and next to it, seemingly at sea, is the city of Night Elves. This is what would later go on to become Darnassus. There are some demons here as well, and the Naga got the region of Ajara. There are a few settlements here and there, and we can, for the first time ever, see the barons marked on the map. There is also Theramore, which is a human city. There's no Ratchet on this map, but at the bottom we can see a goblin island called Gas Valve. This was cut from the game, but the name could have been the inspiration for Gaslow, as it sounds kinda similar. Now for the most interesting part of this map, Ulduar, but not as a Titan city, as a whole continent. It remains largely unmarked except for the place called the Maw. If this has any similarity to the Maw we got in Shadowlands is unknown, but it's probably not, and it's the only marked place we have on the whole continent. This would make it largely undeveloped, so we can't know what was supposed to be there. And in the center of the map we got our Maelstrom and Nejatar again, with it being marked as the city of Nagas. And to the south we got Undermine, with a goblin city and a marked location I couldn't make out. Further east we got the Tomb of Sargeras, marked as demon territory, and all the way east we got the Eastern Kingdoms. There are some minor differences to it. For example, it seems that the Night Elves had a presence on the Isle of Quel'Danas. There are 3 orc settlements as well, and a goblin settlement on the far south. The name seems to be different from Booty Bay, and it's very blurry as well, so I couldn't make it out. We also got the islands of Kultiras, Crestfall and Tol Barad in the Baradin Bay, which we didn't get to see in game. We only got to see Tol Barad in Cataclysm, and Kultiras and Crestfall were seen in Battle for Azeroth. Now about these flags. I'm not entirely sure I'm correct in what I said earlier, but that's the best theory I've got. It seems odd to me that the goblins wouldn't be neutral, as in the previous map we saw that the Undermine was the only way for players to get around different continents. Maybe at this point that was changed and they decided to give the Horde the goblins, but then changed it back to the goblins being neutral, and then Cataclysm just gave the Horde a faction of goblins. Notice that there are no flags for troll settlements and for gnome settlements, so they definitely weren't planned as a playable race right now. What do you think about this map? To me, this one was the most interesting one, so I would love to hear your opinion in the comment section below. Here's a cool little sketch of what would become the final map in World of Warcraft. It mostly depicts dungeons around the world. Northrend, for some reason, is drawn with a dotted line, as well as some minor islands and Quel'Thalas. There are some new locations around the continent, such as Talon, which would later become Stone Talon in Kalimdor, Flame Reef, Skull Rock, something named Grotto Dungeon, Silithid something to the south, which would make the first mention of Silithid in World of Warcraft map, a place called the Draenidin, which could have been tied to the Draenei in some way, and also there's a place marked Nusdormu. This would be the Caverns of Time, which were initially intended as a dungeon. And at the very south we got Uldum, which we didn't get to see until Cataclysm as a whole zone. In the Eastern Kingdoms we got Alexstrasza, which is probably what the Dragon Isles were intended to be. There is a gold mine marked on the map, as well as some diamond mines. Gold mine will probably become the Fargo deep mine, and the diamond mines could be tied to those caves in Stranglethorn, with the basilisk who turned people into diamonds. And the last map, we got the 2001 concept map for World of Warcraft. It's largely the same as the one released in vanilla, with a few notable exceptions. Instead of Darnassus, there's an island there that has a Furbolg totem marked on it. This island would later be moved south when the game released, as it looks completely the same, though this island was never accessible and was eventually replaced with Pandaria. Near Hyjal, there's something called Amberhorn Caverns that we didn't get to see in the game. And at the very south is Uldum before it was cut. There's no maelstrom in the middle now, and in the south we can see an unmarked island. This could either be in Pandaria or Undermine, but right to the east of it we got our first very depiction of Zandalar. This too was cut from the game. The Eastern Kingdoms remains the same to how it was in vanilla, except for Tol Barad and the Dragon Isles that were cut from the game. In the middle of the map we can also see that the players were still intended to go to the Emerald Dream via World Trees and to Outland via Dark Portals, plural, in this stage of development, though this was ultimately cut from the game. We can also see a huge island near the Eastern Kingdoms that would probably be Kultiras, and a small island above it which would probably make it Crestfall, though there is also a small island to the northeast of the Kultiras, so this could either be Crestfall or it could be the island of Baylor that appeared in Warcraft 2 but still hasn't made its appearance in World of Warcraft. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed my TED Talk about geography. If you want more videos like this, feel free to subscribe, leave a like if you liked it, leave a dislike if you disliked it, and I will see you in the next one. Peace.